This is Mrs. Berkeley, and I'm going to review some information that you will need for your biology end-of-course exam in Florida. This video will cover aquatic systems, energy transfer, food webs, biodiversity, carrying capacity, succession, and invasive species. Water is a carbon sink, meaning it can store a great deal of carbon. Much of the carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere will end up in large bodies of water. Carbon dioxide in water changes the pH of the water. Enzymes in living organisms have a very limited range of tolerance for pH change. When the pH of the water changes, the organisms die. Coral bleaching is happening all over the planet as our oceans absorb carbon dioxide and coral die. When the reefs die, the fish and other organisms that depend on the reef for food and shelter suffer too. The temperature of the water is important for the organisms that live there. Water that is too hot or too cold cannot support life. The clear blue water off the coast of Florida and Bahamas does not have any organisms in it. All of our fisheries are in the north where photosynthesis can occur and fish can feed. Even coral reefs suffer when water temperatures rise. The amount of salt in an aquatic ecosystem is very important. Some organisms can move between salt and fresh water, while others can only live in a narrow range of salinity. As ice melts, it not only changes the temperature of the water, it adds fresh water, which changes the salinity and can affect ocean currents as the denser salt water sinks to the bottom. The water cycle includes transpiration from plants as they pull water up from their roots to their leaves. The water released from plants will condense and form rain clouds, which is why it rains every day in a rainforest. Without the plants in the rainforest, it will not rain. All water that is on the ground will soak into the ground or run off as surface water and find its way to the ocean. That means that if there is plastic or chemicals on the ground, they will travel with the water into the ocean. Organisms that live in water depend on sunlight for their food sources. As water gets deeper and farther away from the coastline, sunlight cannot penetrate very deeply. Most aquatic life lives near the surface where photosynthesis can take place. The prefix a means without, so aphotic means that there's not enough sunlight for photosynthesis to occur. Most organisms on the planet receive their energy from the sun. Either they are autotrophs and produce their own carbohydrates using light energy, or they ingest another organism. This diagram shows the general trend of energy transfer between organisms on the planet. The producers make up the base that all life depends on for food. These are autotrophs. They are always extremely large numbers and make up the most mass. They get 100% of their energy from the sun. 90% of that energy is used for their own growth and reproduction and is ultimately lost to the environment as heat. Only 10% of the sun's energy is available for organisms that will eat them. Primary consumers will eat producers, and they will use 90% of the energy that they got from the producers for their own growth and reproduction, and therefore only 10% of the energy that they got from producers is available to the predators that eat them. This continues for the tertiary consumers that eat the secondary consumers, and again for the next level of consumers. If each level is only getting 10% of the energy from the level below, that means that primary consumers are only receiving 10% of their energy from the sun, and the next level up is only receiving 1% of their energy from the sun. This continues again in the next level, and the shark at the top of our energy pyramid is only receiving 100% of the sun's energy. This is why so many really large animals eat so low on the food chain. Hippos, rhinos, elephants, moose, deer, whales, bears, etc., are always eating producers or primary consumers as their preferred food choice. Animals are all heterotrophs, and as you move up the trophic levels in the energy pyramid, individuals get larger, but there are fewer of them. Humans do not belong on energy pyramids or in a trophic level. Energy is reduced every time you move up a trophic level, but matter is transferred 100% all the way up. This is called biomagnification. Let's say that a chemical is placed on 10,000 producers. Each primary consumer eats 10 of the plants with chemical on it before they are eaten by a predator. Each one of the small fish eats 10 of the crustaceans who ate the affected plants throughout their life before they in turn are eaten by a bigger fish. Again, each fish eats 10 of the smaller fish before they are eaten by a shark who eats 10 of these fish out of all the fish that he eats throughout his life. All the chemical that was on all 10,000 plants is now in this one shark. The same principle applies to plastic in our ocean. There is a lot of microplastic in our ocean waters, and as organisms eat, it gets into their tissues. Every organism that eats out of the ocean has plastic in their tissue. Humans impact the ocean every time there is a tiny piece of plastic on the ground because as it breaks up, it does not go away. It just becomes smaller pieces of plastic. All of it eventually gets into the groundwater and finds its way to the ocean. This also happens with mercury, which cannot be eliminated from the body. Mercury is a neurotoxin. No woman who is pregnant should eat any fish or shellfish from the ocean, and everybody else should limit the amount of ocean fish they eat. Detritivores are organisms like fungi, worms, some bacteria, and many insects. They consume detritus, which includes the bodies or fragments of bodies of dead organisms and fecal matter. Another name for detritivores is decomposers. Decomposers return nutrients to the environment so the nutrients can be used over again. If there were no decomposers, plants would not be able to get nutrients out of the soil to grow. Food webs show the interrelated feeding relationships within a community. Notice that the energy is moving with the arrow. The arrow points to the organism that is receiving the energy. If a species is removed, it can cause a cascade effect by eliminating food sources which continue up the food chain affecting predators, eventually reaching top predators and putting pressure on other portions of the community. With a food source eliminated, a predator would feed more heavily on other members of the community. With so much predation on fewer species, the top predators would disappear also. This cascade effect would continue until the ecosystem collapses. A food chain is a diagram of just one food relationship of one organism to the next organism. An herbivore is an animal that eats only plants. A carnivore, such as this hawk, eats only animals. This black bear is an omnivore, which means they will eat plants and animals. Predators are those animals that eat other animals. Prey are those animals being eaten. Biodiversity increases the productivity of an ecosystem and ensures natural sustainability for all life. Biodiversity is greater near the equator since they have warmer year-round weather and more rainfall. Ecological succession will occur naturally as a community changes over time. Primary succession always begins with bare rock. In this case, a volcanic eruption took place and covered the ground in lava. Lichen and mosses are the first to colonize this new area because there is no organic material to support vascular plants. The mosses and lichen will leave the organic matter behind as they move through their life cycles, and small grasses and shrubs can take root. Larger shrubs and trees can take root when there is enough organic matter in the soil to support the greater requirements for larger plants. Finally, large trees can take root when the other plants have broken up the rocks and added enough organic material to support them. The only difference between primary succession and secondary succession is that secondary succession has soil already on the ground. If there were a catastrophic event, such as a flood or fire, then secondary succession would be able to happen much faster. Secondary succession would begin here and quickly proceed to large trees. The carrying capacity is the maximum population size that a given area can sustain. Prey are often herbivores. so they will eat plants. As the animals eat the plants, their numbers increase, but the plant population decreases. At the same time, predators are eating the prey, so the predator numbers increase. Once the predators have eaten so much prey that prey numbers begin to decrease, the baby boom is over for the predators and their numbers decrease, allowing the prey to increase their numbers. But in our scenario, the plant life won't sustain those numbers, so as soon as the plants are gone and there's nothing for the herbivores to eat, their numbers decrease also. This means that the predator numbers will also decrease. This continues forever as limiting factors of food, water, and shelter mean that no single population in the community becomes too numerous to crash the entire ecosystem. Limiting factors can be positive, as in the food supply is increasing, or negative, as in the food supply is decreasing. The carrying capacity of a population is the average of the highs and lows. There are many limiting factors for populations of organisms. Temperature, the amount of precipitation, mates for sexually reproducing organisms. Plants need plenty of sunlight, nutrients, space. Animals will also need food and shelter. Disease, fire, and floods are a few examples of limiting factors that can impact an entire ecosystem. Another thing that can impact an entire ecosystem are invasive species. Invasive species love Florida weather, but the native plants and animals in Florida are suffering. Non-native plants and animals do not have competitors in Florida and can destroy native ecosystems. Please do not release non-native plants or animals into the environment. If you see a non-native animal, report it using the app I've Got One or online at I'veGotOne.org. You can also call the Exotic Species Hotline. The Pet Amnesty Program can take exotic pets that you can no longer care for. And, as always, biology is a way of life.